Welcome to Means of Grace, a podcast produced by the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church.
Welcome back to the Means of Grace podcast. I'm Jesse Enniss, the Director of Communications for the Leadership Development Team.
And I'm Kim Ingram, the Director of Ministerial Services for the Western North Carolina Conference.
And our guests today are Kent Smith, pastor of Higgins Memorial UMC in Burnsville, and Mark Ralls, the district superintendent in the Blue Ridge District. Welcome.
Thank you for having us today.
We are so glad to have you with us. We are connecting with you both because you have identified a need to develop something called an outward mindset. So could you tell our listeners what you mean when you talk about having an outward mindset?
Sure, I'll jump in. A mindset goes deeper than behavior. A mindset is a collection of core perceptions that we hold about ourselves and the world, and that shapes our behavior. And that's really important because what the Arbinger Institute is trying to do is to offer us something different than a toolkit of strategic behaviors that we use when necessary. They want us to go deeper than that. A mindset is a fundamental habit of mind. It's pervasive. Our mindset shape or color all our behaviors. And most of us, most of the time, gravitate naturally to an inward mindset. I know I do. And I have to fight against that every day. When I have an inward mindset, I'm self-focused. Other people come into my view not as full-fledged persons with their own hopes and dreams, but as objects that I need to either overcome or manipulate in order to achieve my own hopes and dreams. Philosophically, this goes back to Immanuel Kant and Martin Buber. Kant's great ethical insight is that people are not to be treated as means to an other end, but as ends in themselves. And then the Jewish philosopher Martin Buber built a whole system around that, exploring human relationships and how healthy human relationships bring us closer to God. He said we can choose an I-it relationship with others that reduces other persons to objects, or we can choose an I-thou relationship based on mutuality, presentness, and openness to the gift of the other person. And most significantly, Jesus, in the 12th chapter of Mark, says that one of the two most important laws of Israel is to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. I think what outward mindset training does for us is to teach us how to fulfill that commandment by developing a mindset that strives to acknowledge the needs and goals and challenges of those persons we live with or work with or go to school with, to take their full personhood into account.
Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that perspective. I feel like I've heard a few times that sin is kind of that turning inward on oneself, where we're more focused on ourselves than we are on other people. And I really appreciate your focus on the mindset being something deeper. I'm reminded of Paul in Romans 12, where he encourages us to be transformed in the renewing of our minds. And so I really appreciate that connection to the wisdom of old, if you will, in the ways of kind of thinking about all of these things. And I'm wondering if you could share with us some experiences or exposure that you've had that has heightened your sensitivity to this need.
When I first discovered the Anatomy of Peace, Bishop Carter had recommended that to us at annual conference. He was a guest that year, and I decided I would explore it. It really did start to shift and change me from a deep level within. That summer, I was on a family vacation, and my family and I were going to go and camp in the boundary waters of Minnesota. And after a full day of travel with about an hour left in our journey, we were in a rented sedan, and the kids were at each other's throats, and everybody was frustrated and tired. And I pulled the car over and asked my wife to come and drive. And I climbed in the back seat and sat in the middle between my two girls on the hump of that sedan where my head was hitting the roof. And within 3 minutes, I had one daughter on one shoulder resting her head, and the same on the other shoulder with the other daughter. And there was a peace that just entered into the car when I was finally able to recognize what they needed and make an adjustment to accommodate what they were after. Was just a little bit of security and peace, knowing that we were mindful of them and how difficult the day had been. It's definitely set the course of the vacation back in the right direction, and we had a much better time. And I attribute that to the work done through the anatomy of peace and developing this outward mindset towards seeing others and their needs and their desires as equal as my own.
Yeah, so it really shows the value of it for personal relationships as well. And we are people with multiple levels of relationships and kinds of relationships in our lives. And you have to change your mindset, or ideally you change your mindset in all of them, because it's about who you are as a person. It's not about just how you show up at work or how you show up at home or how you show up in the neighborhood. It's really about who you are and how you show up, period.
And that's what I like about the anatomy of peace when he describes these conflicts. Instead of in the box or out of the box or inward mindset or outward mindset, in anatomy of peace, the Arbinger tried a phrase called a heart at war and a heart at peace. That's what really resonated in me in understanding this dynamic. Is my heart at peace towards another where they value like I value, or is my heart at war? I think that was probably the best gift to the church Arbinger could give.
And I think about the first time I took the introductory course, the Developing an Outward Mindset, and I must admit, I kind of walked in thinking, I'm not sure I really need this because I'm a nice guy. And I'm a pretty gentle guy. I mean, if I had a spirit animal, it'd probably be a koala bear. But one of the things that they first taught us is that it's not about nice. It's not about whether you choose to be hard or soft. In fact, that you can be very soft and be quite inward. And one of the exercises that we went through early on is talking about what a hard stance towards someone would be as an outward mindset and what it would look like as an inward mindset. And that was pretty clear to me. That was obvious. But then what really jumped out at me is when they talked about what is a soft set of behaviors with an inward mindset. And I remember just circling all of those things and saying, that's me. I'm inwardly nice. And that's the way I've done ministry, I'm sad to say. I did ministry thinking about what's a very pleasant, gracious, gentle way that I can get the people in my church to do what I want them to do, And so I was missing the boat. And I remember underlining all of the behavioral strategies of an inwardly nice person. We indulge, we pander, we avoid, we cope. And I just thought, that's me. And so I need this. I still need this, but I woke up pretty quickly to thinking that this is something that I'm desperately in need of.
So you each have identified kind of for yourselves, and I'm sure that's part of the first step is really being able to look at ourselves and see where we are. Mark, I really want to follow up with what you were just saying, because you identified it in your own leadership and in how you pastored churches, and now you're a district superintendent. And so I wonder, as you are in and out of churches and talking with leaders, clergy and lay leaders, what are you experiencing? What are you seeing? What might even you hope for that this has given you some insight around that you can offer wisdom, advice, or insight maybe to others based on your experiences?
Well, thankfully, superintendents don't have to be as nice as pastors. So I've relieved myself of a little bit of that. But seriously, to your question, it's needed now more than ever before, because it feels like what's happening in our culture is taking over our churches, in that we are not seeing each other, especially those who disagree with us on fundamental theological or political issues, as full people. And so it's really hard, and we really have to work to develop a mindset that helps us do that. In a lot of the meetings I'm in with churches, things get, things get kind of sharp sometimes. Just yesterday, I was in a meeting and a layperson was expanding a thought process that I didn't share. And I remember just in my mind thinking outward mindset, and I can receive this as something different than a competition to my views. So that's how I've experienced it. And boy, it's such a time as this that we really need this training and this approach.
And what's so powerful about the outward mindset is that it invites others to also display an outward mindset, even if they're not familiar with the concepts or understand what's going on. And what I really appreciate about Mark and his role is that he has done a very good job at presenting and sharing and inviting others to stay outward, even in these contentious conversations and conflicts that arise in churches. And so I've called on Mark several different times just to make sure I've gotten on my own gauge and making my mindset what all it can be to stay outward through conversations that are happening at Higgins and other places that I've served.
Do you remember that moment in the training where they put 2 empty chairs in front of the room and they visualized that an inward mindset, the back of the chairs are facing each other. So the people sitting in the chairs are looking in opposite directions. And then they asked the question, okay, what do you do as someone who is cultivating an outward mindset? And it's almost a setup because you want to say, okay, you ask the other person to turn your chair around so we can look each other face to face. And then they say, no, it's not that. You turn and face them regardless of whether they're facing you. And that helps me in a lot of moments that I've had lately, in the sense of saying I can't control another person's mindset, but I am in complete control of my mindset. And knowing that is freeing. And I feel like it allows me to be, hopefully, the person that Christ is calling me to be in those kind of situations.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And when we have an inward mindset, we actually invite the very behaviors that we don't want and get frustrated by and become agitated over, which was pretty profound when that key concept finally registered for me. So when I'm focused on my own agenda and my own desires, my own needs, I actually invite others to do the opposite of what I really want them to do or what I think would be very helpful. But when you are able, even regardless of what the other person does, turn your mindset towards outwards, all that dissipates and you're able to fully listen to what they're saying with compassion. You may not agree, but you can genuinely listen and understand their point of reference, and then invite ways to go forward that accomplish the desires of all parties involved. Yeah, it's quite powerful how that works.
Yeah, and it's really simple. I mean, a lot of it is just like turning a key in your mind. One of the exercises that they put us through too is to imagine yourself in a conflictual situation where, you and someone are really struggling to meet in your ways of thinking. And then what do you do next? And they just put it, a blueprint of what I've done so many times. You call up another person and you describe the conversation, but you describe it in a way where I make myself look better than I am and I make the other person look worse than I am. And I try to build an ally for my way of thinking. And that was just such a light bulb. I hate to admit the sinking feeling I had of the number of times I've done that as a pastor. And so one of the things that I just take in to my new role and before when I was a pastor of just telling myself I can no longer build allies to my way of thinking. That's just the line I can't cross anymore when I'm in a conflictual situation. And so I just don't let myself pick up the phone, which would seem so natural before.
I'm not there yet, Mark, but I'll call you when I'm in that place because I know you won't become an ally, but you'll help me to turn my mindset back around. So thank you for doing that for me.
Well, thank you. I mean, you do it for me too. It's about building a community of folks that are helping us to work out of that. What do they call it? Getting in your box and then getting out of your box. And so it's not like you got it and then you just, okay, I don't do that anymore. It's like AA. You need sponsors to talk with and say, man, I need a drink. I need to make this call and build an ally. Can you talk me off the ledge?
Isn't that so true, though? With so many things that are hard about life is that we cannot do them by ourselves, that we really do need a community of support and accountability through that. I want to back up just a minute because you all have referenced both the books and the Institute and the workshops. And I want for our listeners who are not familiar with any of that, just to bring some clarity. So the Arbinger Institute is an organization. It's located in Utah. And they, I think, originally published The Anatomy of Peace. As you said, Kent, was their first book, and since have a series of 3 books that relate to how we see and treat other people. And The Anatomy of Peace is one that Bishop Carter references a lot and has been used kind of in some of our denominational struggles over the last several years. The third in the series, the most recent book, is called The Outward Mindset. And around the outward mindset, Arbinger Institute has developed these workshops. And in Western North Carolina, we have had people trained both in the outward mindset or in the workshops. And then we've had trainers trained. And Mark, you have participated in several of the workshops. We actually brought them in Western North Carolina for a day thing one time. I think it was at St. Luke's in Hickory. And that's where a bunch of us were first introduced to Arbinger and to some of these concepts. And Mark, you're in process of becoming a facilitator. Kent, you have already completed the facilitator training and have done some facilitation of workshops in Western North Carolina. And we have like 6 other people who are trained to do that in Western North Carolina. So I just wanted to make that kind of clear as you've been referencing some of these things, kind of what they are and what your experience or how you've participated in those. The Blue Ridge District has been kind of on the forefront of already offering some of these trainings. We had a whole thing in place to offer them broadly in person, and then COVID hit just months after we got everything in place and organized. And so we did a few of the workshops online in COVID, but have really been waiting to be able to do them in person again. And that will happen in 2023. We can talk a little bit more about that later. But Mark, you have invited it over all this time into the Blue Ridge District. And I guess I wonder, you've touched on it, but why has that been important and how has that made a difference that you've seen in the district?
It's probably a little early in the game to say how it's made a difference, to be frank. I feel like that a district, one of the most important, maybe the most important things a district can do is to train pastors and lay leaders so that we can create more effective, more vital churches. This is just simply the best training I've had. I mean, when I think about Arbinger, in terms of just making that difference in my life, this did it for me. Anatomy of Peace, when my church was starting the conversations as we were preparing for 2019 General Conference and being in different places on human sexuality. We did a little course on Anatomy of Peace, mostly because I found it so transformative in my own life. The goal, I think, now that Kent is trained, along with Reverend Joy Moss in our district, the goal is that we will go out to congregations and be able to share this training and these gifts. And what's so wonderful about Kent is his passion for it. Joy, too. Joy has that passion as well. But Kent and I were participants together. And I just remember how he energized the whole group of participants with how much he believes in this. And so I think that I foresee many opportunities, many workshops taking place throughout our 10 counties and churches being hungry for this because of what we're facing now in our denomination. In fact, Kent just had an experience with a congregation. Would you want to share a little bit about that, Kent?
I do, but let me back up first, if you don't mind, sir, because I've also benefited greatly from, a wide array of trainings that the district has offered. I've grown as a pastoral leader, and this is different. And going back to what you said originally, and the outward mindset is a foundational, fundamental way of being that doesn't necessarily line up with a set of processes or steps to conclude. This really gets at the heart of how to invite the very best out of one another. Definitely how to invite the best out of myself. And so when I started to lean into this heavy, it really resonated because, again, as followers of Christ, we want to do everything Jesus recommends in trying our very best to love our neighbors as ourselves and to display the do unto others as you would have them do to you approach. And the outward mindset really is how to do that and do it well. So it's different than the other types of trainings that I've been in that tried to explain a a system of ways to go about leading. This just focuses on my own self. And then from that, I'm inviting others to live in a way that honors and glorifies Christ in every way. So that's what makes Outward Mindset so unique and so special. Back up to what you were asking more directly in the conversations that Higgins Church is having around should we disaffiliate or not? It has the potential to become quite contentious and sides being drawn and turning friends into rivals and that type of thing, wanting to fight for positions that are very strongly held. And what's been beautiful is that throughout this process, with you as a ready standby coach, Mark, I've been able to stay outward. And it has invited the congregation to listen well to one another. I don't know that we've changed anybody's convictions around the issue, but we've listened well and we've heard one another. And so now as we move in further into this disaffiliation process, there's a genuine sadness because we recognize that there's hurt in this process and people are hurting over this decision. Should we remain in the United Methodist Church or should we not? And what will that look like for Higgins Church? And it's quite beautiful. Not that it's fun to see people hurting, but instead of fighting, we are compassionately considering the perspectives of others and how this decision might impact them in a more full way, not just considering what the benefits on, one side of the issue or the other.
It makes a lot of sense. And it's a better answer to Kim's question than the one I gave, because where does this go next in the district? A real obvious place for it to go is for people like Kent to walk alongside other pastors who are choosing to remain UMC, but are serving churches that are in the process of disaffiliating. How do I do this? That is so important right now. And as I think Kent could attest, it's a very lonely place to be when you're there, but it doesn't have to be. You've led in a way at Higgins that has kept that from being competitive or combative. And so it will make for a healthier future for everybody. And I was actually thinking of, when I mentioned the church, I'm glad you mentioned Higgins, but I was thinking of Etowah, who are studying anatomy of peace.
That was one of my first opportunities to facilitate, and what a joy that was. Again, you invite people to consider this fundamental core shift in them, and they start to see how it has an immediate impact. And I'd love to tell you that once you turn outward, you always stay outward, but that's not the case. We probably go in and out often. And from the Etowah experience, it was really powerful to witness as the light bulbs started to turn on and people started to grasp, oh, I can do this differently. And these hard conversations with family members, with longtime friends can go much differently if I will just make this subtle change and choose to see the other person as a person that matters just as much as I do, with the same values and desires and goals that we all carry as a part of humanity, to recognize them and to stop trying to use them as an object, a vehicle to move along, or an obstacle to overcome, or an object that's just irrelevant. I don't need it. It doesn't matter to me. Again, it invites healthy conversation and it invites a curiosity about people that invite others to also turn outward towards the group. So that was a neat experience to see them reacting and getting key nuggets just in the brief one-day training that we were able to offer.
I was so impressed with Richard Buff, pastor of Etowah, because he's seeing this as a strategic move of how do we prepare our people for the conversation that we're going to have over the next 18 months. And then you coming in to lead that just sets it up and turns it on its head in a different direction. That's really, really powerful.
One of the key illustrations that resonated with me a whole lot in Anatomy of Peace is that pyramid where you have your time, and the very top of the pyramid is correcting things that are not going right. And then 80% of the pyramid is helping things go right. And so often before I discovered Anatomy of Peace and allowed this principle to be formative for me, I was spending all of my time trying to correct things that had gone wrong.
Me too.
And it was so frustrating.
Right.
But with an outward mindset, Now I get to spend the bulk of my time helping things go right. And that's building relationships, getting to know people, teaching and communicating, what I understand to be the goals and objectives and direction for the church. It's much more enjoyable work because, again, it's helping things go right instead of always focusing on what's gone wrong or what needs to be fixed.
It's freeing as a leader, isn't it? And I don't want to make it sound like it's a blueprint. It's not that, but you get these, like the pyramid of, I'm in this situation. Oh, here's what I do. I do this, and then I do this, and then I do this. It's common sense, but it's common sense I didn't have. It is common sense I need to be reminded of every day, especially when I'm angry or in a conflictual situation. That's when common sense goes out the window for me.
Similar to when scriptures throw us something that sounds so true, and yet we have such a hard time trying to figure out how it really works. Like when it's better to give than to receive, or the first need to be last and the last will be first. We resonate with those statements and we know them to be true, but how in the world do we put those into practice? And the outward mindset makes those key core principles come to life in a way that just makes life a whole lot more enjoyable and more fun to be involved in.
I mean, one of the things that I'm doing along with a lot of the other superintendents is it's a season of disaffiliation. So I preside over a lot of disaffiliations, and I feel like this training has helped me create an attitude or a mindset that feels like I'm moving in the right direction. It feels more Christ-like to me to be able to say to someone, okay, we're parting company, just as, Silas and Paul did, but we're still part of the same movement of Christians seeking to follow Jesus Christ. And I feel like that I'm in a more peaceful place with working with churches that are disaffiliating because of this training. We've got a long way to go, but it feels different than I think it would have without the training.
To your point, we do have a long way to go in this very difficult season that the United Methodist Church is in. And we've talked a lot about kind of the preemptive mindset to have when we are entering into difficult conversations and difficult circumstances. I think it's a safe assumption to say that some churches will need opportunities to heal after they have been in encounters where maybe both parties have had more of an inward mindset than an outward mindset. So what are some words of care that you would offer in this season where folks are probably coming out of those difficult conversations and difficult experiences?
Yeah, if we can reiterate that people matter, that you matter to me in this whole season of Higgins Church, there's lots of names on roll books and type of things. And I had to share with the church, you're more than a name on a piece of paper and you matter. So to be able to communicate that in a way that is authentic and true will greatly go a long ways towards the healing process of coming out of a season of discernment and possible disaffiliation, and then allowing others to care for you in the same way, to be vulnerable enough to say this hurts without, pointing a finger at any particular person, just say the situation hurts and to express that is also very helpful and invites others to approach you with an outward mindset. That's what I love about doing this work is that you can switch instantly the position of somebody else just by your own outward stance. And so whatever might have been contentious dissipates when that energy just leaves the room. But then to follow up after a difficult conversation, to circle back and to let people know that you're concerned for them. You continue to think about what they shared in that moment of sharing, and that, they have value to you. That will greatly go towards the healing process.
And I'm so excited about what I feel bubbling up in the continuing United Methodist Church. Going back to the bishop's narrative, what is the church going to look like, the UMC? And their very strong statement, we envision a church of traditionalists, of moderates, of progressives, united in the essentials around Jesus Christ, with appreciation for different ways of reading scripture and different callings to connect with the world. And it all feels like this training is coming at a really key moment as we are United Methodism 2.0. And what does it look like to be deeply connectional? And how do we do this as a big tent church? A lot of these ways or methods that have learned from Arbinger will simply show us a good way to do it. How it can be done practically, in our daily church lives. This is how a church can be red and blue and purple, and not just be okay, but thrive in that.
Well, thank you so much, Kent Smith, pastor of Higgins Memorial UMC, and Mark Ralls, the district superintendent in the Blue Ridge District. Thank you for helping us to understand the outward mindset and the benefits of this training and how vital it will be in moving forward as leaders and as Christians in general. Personally, I hope all of our listeners take part in this so that we can share the kingdom mindset with the rest of the world and transform the way we live with and love one another. So thank you so much for all you do.
Just want to reiterate, and I'm so honored to be part of the conference team of facilitated trainers. They're all across the conference. So if anyone is interested, I would strongly encourage them reaching out to the leadership development team, to their district superintendent. I'm happy. I know my colleagues are happy to come and to share what we've learned, because it changes the dynamic in such a powerful way. We would be honored to come and walk alongside pastors, congregations, however we can be helpful to help things go right. I know that's what we would like to do as a core group of facilitators.
Thank you.
Thanks, friends.
Thank you for listening to Means of Grace, a podcast produced by the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church. We hope you enjoy listening to these podcasts and use them as a way to stay connected to our community. Remember to subscribe to Means of Grace for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please leave us an honest rating and a review. It helps others find this podcast. Follow the WNCC on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at WNCC UMC. Once again, that's at WNCC UMC. Means of Grace is produced by the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church and Andy Go of Gojo Studios.